things that concern our ministry as ministers of the Holy Eucharist, and also to make sure that we are also on the same page in terms of how we administer the sacrament to others. If you have time, you can go through this. There are a few things that you may see for your own knowledge. And if you look at this very well, it points out some of the rules and some of the things that we are supposed to follow. I am not going to read everything verbatim, but I just want to point out from the known to the unknown, or what we need to do so that we can all be on the same page. We can all be on the same page. I always look at what the ideal thing should be. So what is it that the church is asking us to do? And what can we also do? Because if the church is asking us to use a ciborium, if the church is asking us to use a ciborium can be this form or another one which has a lid, just like a chalice. I cannot use any ordinary glass or cup to distribute. The church says we must use this. The church also requires of us to use a purificator and also a corporal. I can see that I have a very nice hand towel or handkerchief and I would like to use that. That is not allowed. The church also asks us to use a PYX, P-Y-X, when we are going to administer Holy Communion to the sick. In rare occasion, when you don't have the PYX, you put that in the purificator or in the corporal, but that is just an exception. We use the PYX for it. So I cannot say that if you don't have the PYX, just go and grab it and put it in your hand and grab it into your pocket and then go. That is not the ideal. So what is it that is the ideal thing for us to do? What they call the process and the practices. And what is it that we as a church, we can also look at it and say that, okay, we don't have this, what can we do? There are also some practices that is also creeping into the church. Like a week ago, I told somebody, if you want to give communion to the sick, you see me after Mass. And the person said, okay. Then I got to know that the person is not coming from this church. So the person's idea is to give communion to somebody who is sick, and because she'll be traveling the following week, she'll keep one to herself so that she can take it. Is that how we have to go about it? Maybe yes, maybe no. But how do we make sure that we who are administering the sacrament, Holy Communion, to the sick or even to people who come to church are doing the right thing? I have experienced someone receiving Holy Communion in a paper towel and pretended to take it, but just grabbed it and was taking it home. For what? I don't know. But thank God I have a fish eye. If I say a fish eye, sometimes I see beyond, but now my eyes are growing dim, so I don't see everything. Oh, sorry. Bob, I need to break it, okay? Yeah, it's not broken. So one of the principles that we are supposed to look at is the reverence we must attach to the Holy Eucharist. So the reverence also means that when we are coming to church, whether you are a minister on duty or not, You never know when your service is needed. And I have had a chance of inviting somebody to come and help, and the person was not in a good dress, even though it wasn't bad, but for her, she was coming from the gym. You see? And somebody also stepped out who was in a mini shorts. She came to church, and because we needed somebody, she stepped out. In fact, I wish I could have asked her to stay in the pew. But there was nobody, so she came to help. Then somebody came to me and complained, and I said yes. But you realize that I needed somebody to help. So she came with a good intention to help, but she was not in the proper garment. So I have to let her know, and she said yes. We went somewhere, and then we were running late, and we came to church. That's a good excuse. But should I continue? Maybe no. So we must also be in a proper dressing when we are coming to church, because you never know when your service is needed. One of the things that my rector in the seminary, if I should see him, will praise me for is wearing shoes throughout the day. He knows that I like wearing sandals and easy wear. So when it's my duty in the seminary, he will ask me, are you wearing shoes? Then I'll say yes. After 7 months, I go back and I take it off, I put on my sandals and off I go. Then he will come to the lecture room and call me and say that, are you wearing shoes? I will say no. Because I realize that he knows that I'm not the type who likes wearing shoes. But one thing he said, which we must all follow, is that a soldier must always be on duty. You cannot say that I have excuse that I'm not properly dressed, so they need somebody to help, so I cannot. And he said, if you are going to serve, make sure you dress properly. And as a priest, you have to be in black shoe, black pants, and then also clerical, or at least black pants. That is a the tie for the priest. Even though sometimes some of us will be in jeans and sneakers, they are not appropriate. But we must also set a good example. So one of the things is reverence, and we must also have put on the right attire when we are going to serve. So as part of our reverence, we either bow or we genuflect. So once you are stepping into the sanctuary, this is the sanctuary for us. So this is the altar. And this is the sanctuary. So once we are stepping into the sanctuary, we reverence the altar. The one thing I want to point out is that if you are going to pick the speeches, or you have the Blessed Sacrament, this is an observation. When you have the Blessed Sacrament in your hand, I have to bow. But I have realized that sometimes we have the Blessed Sacrament and then we bow. So the question is, who are you bowing to? So I need to bow and take it, but not to take it and bow, because you are holding Christ in your hand. And whoever, that's why some people, when they come to receive communion, they bow. They bow because you are holding Christ, and they are bowing to Christ and not you. So the first thing I want us to know is that when you hold it, don't bow, but you bow before you pick it. And then when you are going to repose it to the same way, You bow, you pick it, and then when you repose it, you show reverence by bowing. Ideally, they say that we should genuflect. Some people do when they come to church, some also bow. But what about if I have a surgery, a knee surgery, and I cannot kneel down? So, if I cannot bow, if I cannot genuflect, I can bow, unless I have a medal in my neck. You get my point? But whatever way it is, you are showing reverence. So that is the first thing I want us to look at. So now we go to another aspect. If you are distributing communion, and let's say that the communion should fall on the ground, what will you do?
You pick it up and put it under the ciborium.
Okay, so this one is called purificator. It is not only used to purify the vessels, whether the ciborium or the chalice, it is also used to purify your hand when you are distributing communion, in case your finger should touch somebody's lips. There are some people, they are going to receive communion on the tongue, but you don't see the tongue. They don't even open their mouth wide for you to even put it there. So sometimes your finger may end up touching their lips or even the tongue. So the purificator is there for you to clean your hands. Purificator, to purify. So in case you are this, yes?
Yeah, if you accidentally touch someone's mouth, should you leave and because we won't have a purificator with us?
Yeah, he's handing you a purificator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we all have a purificator to make sure that you clean your hands or something like that. Then if you are distributing communion and maybe it falls down, there are particles also sometimes. So those who receive communion on their palm, after consuming it, ideally they are supposed to lick or check if there are particles there. But some just do it and they say, hello. So that is also a practice that we need to educate our people. So coming back to it, if the communion should fall on the ground, you may pick it or you put a purificator over there. So the idea of putting a purificator, if I see this, I don't step on it. Are you getting my point? The same applies to if you are holding the blood and it should spill, which it will hardly, but you never know. The last time somebody, I think, tripped from here and got closer to my hand, but thank God I was holding the ciborium firmly. Otherwise, I would have poured the communion on the ground. So, you just make sure that the idea is to make sure that nobody steps on it. We still preserve the holiness of what we are distributing, which is the body and blood of Christ. Some may consume the communion. Some may put it in a cup with water. And then in the working sacristy, we have a place called sacrarium. So the sacrarium is where we dispose of the precious species. Like when we wash the vessels, we pour the water over there. So that is the sacrarium. It goes straight into the ground. In those days too, when you wash these linens, you don't mix them with anything, you pour them into the sacrarium. But now the idea has changed a bit. So still on disposing the precious species, when accidentally it happens, we know what to do. Any question before we continue?
So is it, it's most preferred if the hose drops to cover it with the purificator?
Yeah, that is the easiest way. You can easily pick it, but you never know if there are particles there, and somebody may step there. So the other thing you do is that after the distribution of communion, you can take the purificator with some water in it just to wipe the ground, just to make sure there's no particles there. Yeah.
Yeah, so Father, would you do that then after Mass? Because if you're doing it while Mass is going on, it could be probably, I think, be a distraction to people. Should you wait until Mass is over and then clean that area?
The United States Catholic Bishop Conference guidelines for extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion made it very clear in the principles that it is better for the people to wait while you pick the purificator and put those things there, and it will teach them that the Holy Communion is precious, and for that matter, we shouldn't toil with it. So people may wait, it will delay, but it's also sending a signal to them that it's not just ordinary thing that we are distributing. So when you have the purificator and you put it over there, it saves time than if you don't have anything. There are some of us priests, when we wash the chalice and then we drink the water in it, we use the purificator to clean our lips. There are some of us priests, I've seen them doing that. It's not meant for the lips, it's meant for the chalice. You see, we do all kinds of things, but the ideal thing is that we ought to do. Any question?
So, if I drop a hose, I pick the hose stuff and then put the purifier down, and then the hose at the end?
Pardon? He said if you drop a consecrated host,
I pick the hose up whole and consume that and then cover the spot with the purifier?
yeah, so if you pick it and consume it, then you put the purificator there in case there's any particles so that nobody step there. Or you can just leave it and put the purificator on it. The idea is you are preserving it so that nobody will step on it. So how do you go about it? You see, besides putting a purificator there can be other means also, but it's easier for you at that time to just put a purificator on it, or you consume it and maybe you check if there are particles, but if there are no particles, so that is okay. The hosts that we have are a bit solid, so you may not have much particles dropping on the ground or the floor. Yep.
Yes, Father, any guidelines regarding the not always children, but often children who come up and they receive a blessing, any recommendation about what we should say to them in terms of blessing?
Yeah, so if you read this one, it just says that if you are not a clergy, you just put your hands on them and say, God bless you. You don't make a sign of the cross. You just put your hands on the person and say, God bless you. So that is also here.
Father, do you think it's prudent to actually touch them in the times that we're living in? Shouldn't we just hold our hand over them?
Yes, I don't touch them. Even when we were not having these guidelines, I wasn't touching them because what kind of pomade are you using? You say cream. What kind of cream did you use? What kind of powder did you use? Cosmetics did you use? So if I stretch my hand to touch you and I don't have the time to purify it, and I'm using the same finger to pick communion, so I don't touch them. I only stretch my hands and bless. Even before then, I don't touch. So I do that because sometimes if you touch a person, who knows, maybe Max is meeting somebody and they are, she put on some kind of cosmetics and touching it may disfigure it. Did I answer you?
Yes.
Okay. Any question? So now let's look at the other aspects where it's also very important to me that a visit to the sick and the homebound. We have established the fact that the ideal vessel that we use to carry communion to the sick is a pyx. Now, some of the pyx may have this covering. Some of them have other cases, and you put them in it. If I am taking communion to the sick and I don't have any case like this, I put that in the purificator and then I carry it along. I don't put it in my pocket. I don't put it in my pocket. I have a place in my car I put the pyx. So the only place that I make sure I take that out is when I'm taking the car for servicing. So at any point in time, like one time I was in downtown Des Moines and they called that somebody was sick, I didn't need to come home. I already have the oil, I have the holy water, and I have the pyx and the communion, and then I took it. I'm not saying that that is the best, but I can be called at any time, and I wouldn't know whether it's easier for me to reach. So I have a place I keep that, which is sacred. And if I'm going out with people and I know we are going to be having all kinds of conversation, I'm very conscious, so I take that out. I have a small altar in the house, which I keep that. So when you and I are going to give communion to the sick, we have to be careful what we say, conversations we have while we are carrying Jesus Christ. Normally, we are not supposed to walk for more than 2 miles, and I believe many of us will drive. So when we are going to give communion to the sick, we have to make sure we get the right vessel, which we do. But the question is, when I go, at what time do I give communion to the person? The pastoral guidelines also say that if the person is sick or very elderly and the person has eaten before, you don't need to say that you have just eaten, so I'll give you communion. You have to observe the fast. I mean, this person is old, this person is sick, so what kind of fasting again? So you use what they call the pastoral judgment to give communion to the person. The question I want to ask is, if you are taking communion to the sick, maybe on Sunday, at what time do you do that? If we are taking communion to the sick.
Right after Mass, go right there.
Right after Mass. Okay.
In our case, our person we take it to isn't up and ready until 10:30. So we have like an hour gap between Mass lunch and everything, trying to get it to him. He'll
Okay,
be eating when we get there, so.
yeah. Any other? So, when we are taking communion to the sick, we just have to make sure that we don't engage in any unnecessary conversation, and then we also don't take communion to carry Jesus around just like that. I mean, I remember very well, a friend of mine was placed on probation for 1 year just because we went out for an apostolate to give communion to some people at the hospital. We came back and he forgot to take the communion and put that in the tabernacle. He was carrying the pigs in his pocket. So after Vesper, that's his evening prayer, the rector was asking, did you bring the pigs and the rest? He said, no, I forgot, it's here. He said, okay. So he carried Jesus around, he went to the dining hall, and he went here to listen to news. So he wrote to his bishop. So he was put on probation for a year because of forgetfulness. But when I asked the rector why he took that action, there were other things that added up to it. So this one was just to trigger it. It just triggered it. So the point is that, I mean, whatever time you are going to give communion to the person, we must bear in mind that we have to treat it with what? Reverence. So if I know I'm going to give communion to somebody maybe at 2, I don't carry the communion and go for coffee and donuts. You get my point? I don't carry the communion and start engaging in all kinds of conversation. And I believe many of us as ministers know how to open the tabernacle, and we know where to get the key. If you don't know, you ask, you will be shown where to get the key. So if maybe I have a meeting or I have something doing, after I finish what I am doing, I can just go and grab the communion, put that in the pigs, and then we go. And as he said, if it wasn't time yet, you know that you keep it safely dignified, then when it's time, you go and give it to the person. In some houses, some of the people may set an altar like a table with a cloth and a crucifix and candle, so that when you get there, you put the pigs on it. But some don't do it. So it depends on individuals. I mean, I've been to places where those people have the altar there, you just put that on it, and some also don't have it. So we just make sure you have that reverence and dignity in doing that. So, do we have a particular time? I know in some parishes, 2 places in New York and another place, they don't do it that way. When it's time before the final blessing, those taking communion to the sick will come forward and pick their pigs, and then they receive a blessing and they go. But the other question is, you are going to mix the interaction with your friends. Then you may not also go for coffee and donuts. That's the side effects of that. So what do? Another place too, what they do is that after Mass, when everything is ready, they just go and pick the pigs and then they go to their assigned places. I am not saying that we should do it this way or that way, but we must know who is doing what and at what point is this person doing this. That is one thing we must know. Then secondly, I'm going to tell people who come in a communion line with a pigs to stop that. I mean, I'm going to tell people, because what happens if you don't know the person? And the person is taking a communion, whether the person is a minister or not, I can go to Divine Treasures and buy pigs. I can go and buy it. If you look at the order of blessing, you see that Eucharistic ministers are duly trained and instituted and commissioned. So it has a process. And you know that you have to preserve this with dignity and respect. So if I also go and buy this, and I come in a communion line and I say I need 2 or 3, of course you may give it to me, but I don't know what I'm going to use it for. You get my point? So we know that there are people who need to receive communion, but how do we reach out to them? I don't have any problem if somebody needs communion and the person is coming in the line, the communion line, to receive it. I only tell you that see me after Mass so that I'll make sure you get what you want after asking you 1 or 2 questions. That is if you are not from this place. But if you are from this place, there's no need to come and ask you. You know what to do. I get my point. If you are a member of this church and you are an instituted member, I don't need to tell you that come and see me or go and see this person or that. You know what you do. You know that at this time you need to take communion to the sick. You have to do this and you have to do that. But you don't come in a communion line and ask me to put in 2 or 3. We are just trying to make sure that there's no aberrations or people do not misuse or desecrate the precious species. We are people who stay at home and watch Mass on TV, and after they finish, they give themselves communion. It's not done. So how did they get the communion? Because they were able to get the pigs, and they got it. And I think one of the priests said they keep it at the dining table. So it's just like dessert. So we have to make sure that we reorient people's mind to do the right thing. Any question?
So if somebody comes forward with a text, we're to say, see us after Mass,
Yes.
no matter what.
Yes. And I don't think any of us will come with a fix because we know what to do. We know where to get the key and where to put, the communion and send it to the sick person.
So can they go to any Eucharistic minister and get the post after Mass?
Well, I don't think there's any Eucharistic minister available apart from maybe deacon, you, and few people around. But if the person to see you and you know the person is not from this parish, you ask, are you a Eucharistic minister and this and that, and where are you taking it to? Just a few questions and say, okay. But if any of us here is taking communion to the sick, I don't think you need permission from me that I'm taking communion to the sick. We all know where to get the communion and what time we want to leave. Am I making sense?
So should we just have them see you after Mass?
If the person is not a member of this church, you can just say that, see me after Mass. If you ask Monsignor may not have much clue, but at least you are the one who is experiencing the person, so that you can ask some questions, just to make sure that the person is taking communion to somebody who is sick. Just for you to ask, because you cannot just say that I need this and then you give it out. It's just like somebody who came one weekend and needs some help. Then I said, okay, how can I help you? I'm hungry, I have not eaten. I said, okay, I have food. He He said, no, I want to go and buy this and that and cook. I said, okay, we have the pantry over here. Let's walk and I will get you something. He said, no, I need some money to buy. I said, okay. If it's money you need, let's go to the grocery stores. If you don't need this, I will buy everything for you. He said, can't you give me $20? I said, no, you're not getting a dime from me. Because I know you use it for drugs. He said, no, I don't do drugs. I said, okay, fine. Sorry, but you're not getting money from me. Why did I take that stand? Because somebody has ever asked for money and I gave the money and the person didn't buy the gas and drove away. I gave money to somebody and the person used it for something else. So I'm getting wise. You see? I've also had a chance whereby somebody came for communion in a Catholic church and took it to their Protestant church for their service. Somebody also went for holy water in the Catholic church and was selling it in his church, a charismatic church. It may not happen here, but I have experienced that. You see? Any question?
Father, if we take communion in the text and we're going to take it to someone who's sick, I know the handout says ideally maybe carry it in a breast pocket, and I don't often have a breast pocket.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it in my pants pocket, or probably not in my coat pocket either. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I put it in your breast pocket, your pocket, or whatever. What is the rule? The rule is that you treat it with respect and dignity.
So is it okay to carry it to my car, put it in just a kind of a safe place in the car? Okay.
You carry it in your car. If you have a decent pocket, fine. But deep within you, you know you are treating this like any other thing. You don't just get things and you just put that anywhere. The respect and dignity should be there. Yeah.
I have one question. What if somebody just had surgery and they cannot, come to church? Is it okay to take them communion just at one time?
Well, I mean, if the person needs communion at whatever time and you are available, you can do that.
Okay. I know people, that, like a knee replacement or something, they were not able to come for a couple of weeks, so I took communion too, but.
Yeah, I mean, communion, you can consume communion every day. I mean, that is why we have masses every day. But because we can't be giving them communion every day, that's why at least once in a week we give them communion. Yes,
And Father, yes. After giving Holy Communion, would you tell us what your preference is in terms of coming back up with the remaining host? Do you want us to set that on the altar, or hand it to you for you to set on the altar? Or does it make any difference?
Yeah, so we have the corpora on the altar, and the corpora from the Latin word corpus, which means the body. So it contains the precious species. And ideally, again, the precious species, which is the communion in the ciborium or the blood in the chalice, it rests on the corpora. So in some places you have big corpora all over on the altar. In some places it's just a sizable one depending on the number of ciboria that you have or chalices that you have. So I prefer that you put that on the corpora. But because we also have a white cloth on the altar, you put that on the white cloth. The idea of putting out the cloth on the altar represent the linens that were used to bury Christ. And then in some instances, some people may have what they call the chalice veil. So the removing of the veil begins the celebration of the liturgy of the Eucharist. You take off the veil in the book of Revelation chapter 7. But because of fast track things, we don't follow some of these things. Even on the altar, it should remain bare. You shouldn't have the candle on the altar. You shouldn't have the book on the altar. The only time you have the book on the altar is during the liturgy of the Eucharist. So that's why the prayers are said at the presidential chair. In some places, you observe that the priest stands at the chair and say the prayer.
Which is why you passed the new lecture.
So I have this one. With time, I will be using it. With time, I will use it. But it takes time to put people and yourself into a new style. But in some places too, you have the candles over there, which we have. But I'm just telling you that if you go to a parish and the altar is bare, you just know that this is what happens. In some places, they have candles there. They have 6 candles. 3 at one end, another 3 at the other end, representing creation. Some may have 4, representing the entire universe. Well, I mean, east, west, north, south. I think we have 4 here. So all these things are symbolic. So when you have the precious speeches, if the deacon is there or the priest is there, you can hand over to him. But if there's nobody, you place it on the corporal. But you don't administer the Eucharist to yourself. You don't take the communion and consume it. You have to affirm your faith. So if, let's say for instance, one of you has received communion, that person can administer it to you by saying the body of Christ or the blood of Christ, in which you say amen. But you don't take it yourself. That's why even the priest has to give it to the deacon. Yeah, I think one of any question? So one thing that I have observed is not from here. It has to do with some kind of conversation I've had with other people. Is they'll go for home visits, and then I'll hear from somebody that, oh, this person went to visit this family to give them communion, and she had been diagnosed with having this disease and that and that. Oh, the house wasn't looking good, and this and that. So, based on such feedback, in one of the workshops, I told them that if you go and visit somebody who is sick, don't be asking them personal questions. Oh yes, I went to see the doctor. So what did the doctor say you have? That is none of your business. And even if the person should say that I have been diagnosed with this, it's not for you to go and tell another person. If you come to tell me, you make sure you tell me in confidence. And I don't go and mention your name and say that, look, they said Bob has this. No. There are some people who are very private. So we must respect their privacy. Even if they tell you, it doesn't mean that we have to go ahead to go and tell others. I mean, it's not here, but just telling you from an experience. So that's all. If you have any question, please let me know.
I have a question about the gluten-free.
Okay.
So like, I can't remember what I served, but you handed me the gluten-free and I took it, and I did have someone who asked me for it. But I had a very hard time holding Ziporium, trying to open the pig
Yeah,
and hand it to him.
that's true.
first of all, I think we can get a pick that's easier to open, but one with a button or something, because it literally takes two hands to do it. I don't know, can I set this aquarium down to do it, or, although there's not a convenient place over there to really sit it, but
I thought maybe the person, and this is the other one, the person taking the gluten-free host, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I thought maybe you could hand them.
I can't hear you,
Oh,
Susie.
I thought maybe the picks could be handed to the person who needs to consume the gluten-free host, and that person opens it. I'm not sure that's ideal, but I thought that's what the person receiving did.
Yeah, so I think because you're very careful that you don't let the precious species fall on the ground, in opening it, it happens. You just have to be careful. So what I do is I make sure I open the lid. I open the lid like this first and leave it. So when it's time for me to give the communion, I don't need to press it open. So I do that before I go there. So once it's open this way, and I'm going to give communion, I make sure the ciborium, holding the ciborium like this, and maybe this one, I make sure the ciborium is close to my breast, and then I pick this. All because I'm being careful, but the easiest way is let the person wait. So when you finish giving a communion, you come and put the ciborium down, you pick the picks and give it to the person. The reason why sometimes it happens is that we don't know who is taking a gluten-free till it's time for communion. So if I know that this person is taking, then you know, okay, now let me go and give it to them at this time. So sometimes they even come in the line before you get to know that they need it. And I remember one time, I saw the pigs on the altar, and I have finished the giving communion, and I was just cleaning up, and I took the pigs back to the tabernacle. Then I see deacon or somebody said, oh, it's time to give communion to somebody. And I said, okay, I didn't know. I sent it back. You see, because I presumed that it had been given already. But the tabernacle is not far. In some churches, the tabernacle is a bit far from the sanctuary. So you can do that so that you make sure that you don't pour the communion on the ground. Just finish giving the communion out, then later on, you can just take the pigs and give it to the person. If you are not ready, the person cannot receive it.
Most of our people have been told that they should come up last if they need a gluten, and then they will wait. Because technically, you've got meat particles on your fingers.
I was gonna say that.
So you really should, and that's part of the reason for the purificator as well. I mean, some people are drastically allergic to them, even though they're very small, but, so we've asked them to come up, and most of them know they will have to wait. Because you have to get your fingers clean from the wheat to take their host to them.
Is it enough to wipe your fingers on the dryer purificator, you know, Barb?
Yeah, I think so.
But it's true, some people can't even have
Some
heat
people.
on.
Okay.
It's kind of like communion on the tongue, or asking them to come up last, so that you really don't have to worry about, having your tongue touch, your fingers touch their tongue, and then go to the next person.
Yeah, so I think for the sake of hygiene also, I mean, I didn't know that I have to rush you people. So when you wash you sanitize your hands, which they are telling us that there are certain things in hand sanitizer which doesn't make it hygiene or whatever. Let's leave that. Once you sanitize your hands and consume it, it's believed that your finger will be touching your face mask and the rest. So you sanitize your hands again before. So I always make sure that after consuming it before I wash my hands or I sanitize my hands so that there's no contact between my hands and my nose mask or face mask, whatever. Sometimes it gets so stuck to my nose that I wish I could pull it down, but there's nothing I could do. So it's part of the crosses we have to carry. Any question? So let's continue to educate ourselves, and I believe that as extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, you know how to conduct communion service. Do you? Do you all know how to conduct communion service? Okay. So at some point we shall look into that and how to expose the Blessed Sacrament and repose it during an adoration or holy hour. So for instance, first Friday we have adoration. I can ask one of you to come and expose it, and then at the end somebody can come and repose it. The only thing is that you don't bless with it. So it's something that you have been instituted to do. So at some point in time, we shall look at how to go about some of this. I don't want to put so much on you. I just want all of us to be on the same page. And now that I've told you that people who come in the communion line with the pyx shouldn't be receiving communion in it, I'll tell the entire church. I'll tell them that nobody should come with a pyx to receive communion. You are not going to receive it. So you see somebody and we have a QR code for you to answer, then we know that you are instituted person to receive to take the communion in the pyx bowl. We just don't want anybody to come and receive it. But we know ourselves, so we don't need to come and say that, I need a QR code or I need to verification before. But if somebody comes and you don't know the person, then you can ask. And I don't think any of you will come in the communion line with that. You know where to get it. And one of the things that if it is missing, it will go against me is a tabernacle key. That's very important for the pastor and the church key. So if the tabernacle key is missing, it's not good for the pastor. That's why I don't keep it in the eyes of the people. We make sure it is kept safe. So that at any point, if the bishop comes and says, let me see your tabernacle key, you know where to get it from him. A priest was made an associate from pastor to associate because he misplaced the tabernacle key, and for 2 weeks they couldn't get in. So the bishop heard of that and made him an associate. Some of our bishops are very wild. Thank you.
Father, I've got one. As far as coming up, we wait until after you consume the host, right?
Yes.
And then come up, and there's always going to be, 2 here, and 1 there, and 1 there, right?
Yeah, the same way.
So you know if somebody didn't show up or couldn't make it, then you can come up and sub.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you realize that we still need somebody, you can step out.
Okay.
As long as you're in the proper garment.
Okay.
Yes, you do that. And sometimes if I see you are sitting here, I may ask you to give communion to those on the west. Sometimes I do that. I just see, okay, you are coming from here, so maybe you go here or go to the middle. But sometimes before Mass, that arrangement is made to know that you are taking this side or that side. But we also do that when you receive the ciborium. that maybe you take left or you take right. I've also observed that sometimes you wait till the priest is ready to give communion. But I think once the cantor has started singing, once you receive it, you can go to your post. Because you are not going to the same place for you to wait for me. It's also time. So I don't have any problem if I give it to you and you move.
You just go ahead and go.
Yes. Because maybe I have to check something or give it to somebody. It's just like after communion. After communion, once the blessed sacrament is reposed into the tabernacle, in the presence, reverence the tabernacle, you don't need to be kneeling down. Because it's just a cleaning that is going on. So if you are kneeling down and it's taking 1 hour to clean, you'll still be kneeling down. Are you getting my point? We know that because the communion is on the altar. But when it is reposed, you don't need to kneel down. But I know people do it out of tradition. So one day I will wait for 15 minutes. Okay, next, I think we are done.
Okay.
So thank you very much.